Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to the British Grand Prix race debrief. So for the second Grand Prix in a row, we got an absolute cracker. Those first 20 laps or so were fantastic. And yeah, alright, things went a bit quiet sort of midway through, but there was still plenty going on and I loved it. And just like Austria, I will happily sit down and watch that all over again. Before I get onto the result and go through all the teams as I usually do, I just want to give you a very quick heads up about this video. It is going to be slightly different to the ones I've been doing so far this season in terms of the debrief, but I don't want to go into that too much now. I just want to let you know that there will be a channel update video very soon that will explain some of the changes on the channel and the reasons for them. But anyway, let's get back to it and have a look at the final race result. And it was Lewis Hamilton who crossed the line to take a record-breaking 6th British Grand Prix victory ahead of teammate Valtteri Bottas, and the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc rounded off the podium places. Pierre Gasly came home in 4th, a much-needed boost for him, and he finished just up the road from teammate Max Verstappen, with Carlos Sainz recovering to 6th, and Daniel Ricciardo taking 7th. Kimi Raikkonen was 8th for Alfa. Daniel Kvyat once again made his way through the field to pick up points for 9th. And Nico Hülkenberg took that final points-paying position with 10th. Lando Norris just missed out on points at his home Grand Prix, finishing 11th with Alex Albon 12th and Lance Stroll 13th. George Russell picked up his best ever finish with 14th, and teammate Robert Kubica was 15th. The second Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel crossed the line in 16th. More on that a little bit later on. And Sergio Perez was last of the classified finishers in 17th. That obviously means that 3 drivers retired from the race, and they were Antonio Giovinazzi, Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen. What a miserable weekend for Haas. Let's start running through the teams then, starting at Mercedes, and what a brilliant battle between both Hamilton and Bottas early on. Hamilton did briefly take the lead on lap 4, going around the outside of his teammate at Luffield in a great move, only for Bottas to then trump that by taking the lead back, making a move up the inside of Copse. Another great move. As we've seen several times this season, most notably in Baku, there was a lot of respect shown by both of the drivers, and they again proved to their team that they can race cleanly. I'll say it, had Rosberg been in that second Merc, I'd take a guess that things would have ended very differently. As I said earlier, it was a record-breaking 6th British Grand Prix win for Lewis, but on the face of it, there was a huge slice of luck with the timing of the safety car. Interestingly enough, though, the Brit has since said that he does not believe that that was the deciding factor in the race because he had opted for a one-stopper and not the 2. So actually, if you think about it, even without the safety car, he was still making 1 stop less than Bottas, and so more than likely would have won anyway. As I tweeted at the time, though, and I stand by that, the safety car was still perfectly timed for him. Absolutely no doubt there. Toto Wolff did confirm in a post-race interview that there have been discussions between the team and the drivers in a pre-race strategy meeting, and it was apparently decided that the driver running in second place could run the alternative strategy if they chose to do so, which Hamilton obviously did. There was a bit of confusion late on in the race with Mercedes telling Lewis to pit, and the Brit, well, didn't, quite frankly. He did say in an interview, though, that he didn't see the point in risking a late pit stop if they didn't ultimately need to make one. He did also admit to being a bit conflicted due to some blistering on his tyres, but ultimately decided to go against the team's advice and manage his tyres to the end of the race. The team apparently did have their doubts about whether a one-stop strategy would work, and Bottas has since admitted that was a mistake. Of course, that's easy to say with the benefit of hindsight. And although there was some disappointment from the Finn about losing ground in the championship fight, he didn't look overly disappointed. And he did take to Twitter shortly after the race to simply say, quote, "It's not over yet, never give up." I probably ought to add that Toto Wolff has also said that Mercedes will look to make sure that they are not, in his words, unconsciously favouring either of their drivers by allowing them to run on different strategies. Look, I'm going to say before moving on that had I been in Mercedes' position, I personally would have pitted Bottas for hards as soon as that safety car had come out. Yes, okay, he just pitted, but Vettel came into the pits under the safety car and came out third, so Bottas would not have lost a position. Then again, flipping that around, if their belief was that the one-stop strategy wouldn't work, then maybe even with that second stop and so long to go on the hards, they weren't confident that those would get to the end. And I guess ultimately that's why I'm a fan and not a team principal. Down at Ferrari, well, where to start, really? Let's go with the positives for a change, and that was an epic fight between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. Loved every second of that. And they were at it for pretty much the whole of the first half of the race, and some of Leclerc's defensive driving was absolutely exceptional. And even on the attack, he was aggressive but fair. I'm going to keep saying it, I cannot overstate just how much I love watching those two go toe-to-toe, and how excited I am to see that continue well into the future. There were a couple of moments that were right on the limit, I guess. Charles did make a very late move to defend on the run down the Hangar Straight, and although the stewards didn't look at it, it is the kind of move that, if it becomes a regular thing, he could find himself getting into a spot of bother, a bit like we saw with Max Verstappen in the whole introduction of the Verstappen rule, as it was nicknamed. I don't personally think it warranted any in-race action, but maybe just a quiet word from the stewards before Germany. The two were also side by side through Vale and Club at one point with some wheel banging and a few question marks over track limits. Sky picked up on that in commentary and asked if Max had kept his position by going off the track, and whilst he technically did, Charles did run him completely out of road and was half off the track himself. So for me, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, no big deal. I've got to say though, it was great to see the stewards letting hard racing happen on Sunday, just what us fans have been screaming for. The stewards did have to get involved a little bit later on in the race when Vettel and Verstappen came together. If you didn't see it, Seb went for a move into Vale, Max defended the inside, Vettel locked up and slammed into the Red Bull, and they both ended up in the gravel. 100% Vettel's fault, and he was rightly penalised with a 10-second time penalty. Verstappen's move to defend was not particularly late, as some have claimed. In fact, the move was a hell of a lot earlier than the one that Leclerc made on the Hangar Straight, and for me, Max is in no way to blame for that at all. I do my best to try and be balanced when it comes to stuff like this and look at it from both sides, but Vettel was all locked up, out of control, and hit the Red Bull, causing damage to both cars, and in the end costing Verstappen at least third, perhaps even a shot at second, with Bottas still needing to stop again. Of course, that's purely speculative, however, third was definitely on. Sure, the Ferrari will have lost downforce behind the Red Bull and that will likely have contributed to a point, but when it boils down to it, it was Seb's fault. He apologised to Max straight after the race, admitted to the media that it was his mistake, and took responsibility. That's it, move on. On the penalty though, super quickly, 10 seconds for me is about right. I've seen some people saying that it was wrong to give Vettel a penalty because he had come off worse, but that's utter nonsense, quite frankly. I don't give a damn if the driver that caused the crash is first or 20th. If you do something like that, it's a penalty and it should be given regardless of where you are. We can't scream for steward consistency and then bitch when a driver gets what I've seen some describe as a double whammy punishment. Seb made the mistake, he damaged the Red Bull and negatively affected Verstappen's result. Penalty every day of the week. Moving on to Red Bull, and I guess I've pretty much already covered Verstappen, but just to finish off on him, he drove really well again on Sunday, and I just want to reiterate that he would have been on for a podium without that incident with Vettel, and again, just how much I enjoyed seeing him and Leclerc scrapping it out. More of that, please. Max did say post-race that he thought Leclerc was still, quote, a little bit sore from Austria, so he was defending really hard, and also went on to say that that was fine with him, basically, and that he enjoyed it. He's pretty much accepted Vettel's apology for the crash between them and already appears to be ready to move on from it. All in all though, that Red Bull was so much more competitive than I expected at Silverstone, and I really feel like they and Verstappen could be massively optimistic about the rest of this season. Pierre Gasly though had a much better weekend, and not just in the race. He topped a practice session, was only 3/10 off his teammate in quali, and managed to take 4th place as well. Huge confidence boost for him, and a much needed one at that. Alright, yeah, 3/10 is still a pretty big gap to someone in an identical car. The thing is though, as I keep saying, Max has got to be worth a couple of tenths, so you could call that a net 1/10, but even so, that is a damn sight closer than he has been for much of the season so far. And yeah, again, I know he probably wouldn't have beaten Verstappen in the race without that crash, but he would still have been top 6, which again, as I keep saying, is for me the minimum he needs to do this season. So yeah, a great result from his point of view, but it was his performance that was more impressive and more important this weekend. Before we got to the British Grand Prix, it was said that Pierre was going to stick closer to Max's setups from Silverstone onwards, and perhaps that did help him at the weekend. And if that was the case, he'll be doing the same for the rest of the season, that is for sure. Red Bull did issue some team orders during the race, and to be honest, it was pretty much understandable. Apparently though, the team initially took the subtle approach by telling Gasly basically your teammate is on a different strategy so don't hold him up, which is generally a really weakly coded way of saying shift your backside mate. But he did not let Verstappen by straight away, and it took Christian Horner giving a firm order for him to eventually let Max through. As I say, some might say it was harsh on Gasly, but it was understandable and the right call. Max was much quicker at that point and was the most likely of the two to catch Vettel, which, as we know, he did. On to the rest of the field then, and McLaren had another good race, especially with Carlos Sainz, who made his way up from 13th on the grid to grab 6th place in the race. As we said last night, that 6th place was pretty much won in the opening couple of corners when he made his way past the 2 cars ahead of him to become the lead car on the medium tyre in that midfield fight. And apparently, according to the Spaniard, that was the plan and was key to their strategy. Carlos is very good at getting it done on the opening lap, isn't he? And overall, I keep saying it, he's been one of the big surprises so far this season for me. It wasn't totally comfortable though, and although the safety car was perfectly timed for him, tyre management was definitely needed to make the one-stopper work, and he was less than a second clear of Daniel Ricciardo as the two of them crossed the line. I don't really know what else to say, just a great recovery from Sainz once again, and he was definitely my driver of the day. His teammate Lando Norris had a bit of a mixed day really. He was in the fight for 6th with Sainz and Ricciardo. However, opposite to his teammate, the safety car came out at the wrong time for him, and that really ended up compromising his race. He did say afterwards that he felt that they made a mistake by not pitting again as soon as the safety car came out, but as I said with Bottas earlier, that's all with the benefit of hindsight. He got involved in some seriously good scrapping early on, although apparently he did damage his car after contact at turn 3, but that certainly didn't show when it came to his pace. He was definitely still quick. I mean, it's a shame he couldn't grab a point or two at his home Grand Prix, but safety cars either go for you or against you, and yesterday it was the latter for Lando. But to round off on McLaren, I think both the drivers and the team can be very, very happy with the pace of that car once again. As said there, Daniel Ricciardo was not too far off 6th place come the end of the race, but it was still a decent haul of points for Renault. And I can't help but feel that they are starting to find that performance we all expected to see at the very start of the season. Okay, it was a rough weekend in Austria, but the signs are certainly positive. In fact, the Aussie did say in the team's post-race press release that he felt like there had been a solid turnaround in both race pace and one-lap pace at Silverstone. Again, he was another driver who was, I guess, unlucky at the timing of the safety car because that gave Sainz a chance to pit without losing too much time. But he certainly made that up, and there was some great battling for most of the race between the Renaults and the McLarens. That is something I think we are going to see a lot of between now and the end of the season. Bring it on. Nico Hülkenberg grabbed the last point, but described that 10th place as one of the toughest points for him in F1 so far. Nico did suffer a mechanical issue at one point which saw him slowing on track. He's quoted as saying that he had to run the car in, again quote, engine limp mode for a couple of seconds, which of course obviously cost him time. The team also feel that they pitted the German just a little bit too late, which meant he was struggling on the tyres, whereas his teammate was much better off. But to quote Hülkenberg once again to round this off, it was just one of those Sundays where all the setbacks added up and cost us. A mixed race down at Alpha, I think it's fair to say. Kimi Räikkönen picked up some very good points after starting in 12th. I don't honestly really remember seeing too much of him during the race, but it really has been a positive couple of weekends for him and the team. They were very quick in Austria and they were quick again this weekend. Kimi did say post-race though that despite the positive result, it wasn't the easiest of weekends for them and he was fighting hard late on to keep Daniel Kvyat at bay. In the end though, he was just over a second clear of the Russian. Antonio Giovinazzi felt like he could have been on for a points finish before spinning into the gravel, which of course caused that safety car. Now, in the Alpha press release, he and the team boss Frederick Vasseur say that something broke on the car causing the spin, but that they weren't sure what it was and the team are going to investigate it. However, in a post-race interview, Gio stated that it was a puncture, and to be honest, when you watch it live and when you're watching the replays, it did look like a puncture. So yeah, a mixed day for Alpha, but there are a lot of positives for them to take away, and they definitely look able to fight towards the top end of that midfield again. Daniel Kvyat once again demonstrated his ability to make his way through the field starting 17th, and as you saw earlier, finishing up in 9th. And by the way, he pitted twice, so it wasn't like it was a very cleverly managed one-stopper. Of course, the safety car helped him out massively, but it was just another exceptional drive from him, and it's right that he's getting so much credit at the moment, not just for Sunday, but for what he's done so far in 2019. And although I went with Sainz for my driver of the day, Kvyat has got to be right up there and deserves an honourable mention. Toro Rosso did look pretty quick this weekend, and Alex Albon was in the fight for points as well. Whether he got them or not, we'll never know. But he started in a career-best 9th on the grid and was involved in some really enjoyable racing with Lando Norris and the Renaults, especially after the safety car restart. However, Albon had to resort to some pretty heavy tyre management after the team discovered a high voltage issue in the data, and that meant that for safety reasons they couldn't pit him for a second time, and it was in fact Honda who advised the team against a second pit stop. A very worrying issue for any car to have, and of course Honda have said that they will be investigating it immediately. It was a quiet weekend for Racing Point, and for the most part I don't really recall seeing much of them, to be honest. Actually, despite racing well to make his way up to 13th place, Lance Stroll described it as a weekend to forget. Apparently the Canadian needed to pit earlier than planned to have some debris removed from his brake ducts, and that in the end forced him into a two-slot strategy rather than the one that they were planning. Sergio Perez was running fairly well before the safety car came out just after he pitted, and in his words, that ruined my race. He actually believed he was on for points as well without it. The Mexican did end up crashing into Nico Hülkenberg and damaging his own front wing. That, of course, made matters worse for him, and according to Checo, it was an issue with his steering wheel that resulted in his brake balance being too far forward, and that in turn meant that he could not slow the car down enough, hence the contact with the Renault. I mean, let's not make any bones about it, it wasn't a good weekend for Racing Point. Let's just hope that their new car, which is expected to run from the German Grand Prix onwards, sees them find some pace and performance. Do you know, not a bad race all in all for Williams. As I mentioned earlier, George Russell managed to make it to the flag for a career best 14th place finish, and Robert Kubica took his best finish of the season with 15th. I know there were reasons behind it all, 3 retirements, Perez and Vettel getting involved in their own incidents, but it's just a little bit of a confidence boost for a team that have really struggled so far this season. And once again, as has been the case all year so far, both drivers finished the race, which is about all you can ask of them really. In fact, I think, along with Mercedes, they're the only team to get both cars to the finish every single race so far this year. It's not much, but it's something. Honestly, not a lot to say other than that. Russell enjoyed the race and driving around Silverstone in front of his and of course the team's home fans. And Kubica said that the pace in the car, quote, wasn't too bad. And finally, Haas. I don't know. What a rubbish weekend for them in so many ways. Neither driver had a particularly good qualifying, with Grosjean 14th and Magnussen 16th. And the race didn't get any better, with the 2 teammates making contact on lap 1, resulting in early pit stops to repair damage and replace tyres, but both eventually went on to retire due to the damage caused by that accident. On the incident, I just think it's one of those first lap things. I don't personally feel either driver was to blame. Gunther Steiner, though, was flipping livid after the race, saying that it obviously was a very disappointing race for the team, and added, quote, "The best that our drivers could bring to the battle was a shovel to dig the hole we're in even deeper." Never one to mince his words, but you can totally understand his frustration and anger. He did also add that the team will regroup and, to quote him again, "see what we do in future." Now, I assume that's car related, but frankly, I wouldn't blame him or Gene Haas if they chose to reevaluate their driver lineup, certainly in terms of Romain Grosjean. Sorry, Dan. I've got to be honest though, I do kind of feel for Haas at the moment. I know some of it's their own making with the tyre problems and the aero and the car and blah blah blah, but everything that's going on behind the scenes with Bitch Energy is a distraction. They just don't need it at the moment, and that's not their fault. Here's hoping they can get their off-track woes sorted for Germany. Super quickly before I go, let's have a look at the championship standings, starting with the top 10 in the drivers. Lewis Hamilton is still top, 223 points for him, and his teammate Valtteri Bottas is still second on 184, and Max Verstappen is third on 136. Sebastian Vettel is fourth on 123, but is now just 3 points clear of teammate Charles Leclerc on 120, and Pierre Gasly, despite a much more promising weekend, is still a long way back in sixth on 55. Carlos Sainz is still best of the rest on 38, with Kimi Raikkonen 8th on 25, Lando Norris 9th on 22, and Daniel Ricciardo also on 22 in 10th place. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes are obviously still top. That's all done and dusted, isn't it? 407 points for them. Ferrari second on 243, and Red Bull sit third on 191. Can Red Bull catch Ferrari and finish second? That's the big battle up there now. McLaren still sit fourth on 60 points. 60 points for McLaren. Did not see that coming. Renault, they are 5th on 39 points. Alfa is 6th on 26 points. Racing Point and Toro Rosso are tied on 19 points apiece, 7th and 8th for them, and Haas are 9th with just 16 points on the board, but it's 16 more than Williams having 10th, who prop up the table. That is it then for the British Grand Prix debrief, but don't forget that you can let me know your thoughts about the race down in the comments section and who was your driver of the day. Now, I will be back soon with more content as ever, but in the meantime, don't forget that you can follow me over on social media, and all of the links you need for that are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.